What's this? Just second and third-rate resumes, huh? No one from Harvard University, I see.
A Harvard University graduate interviewer said while looking at the resumes of job seekers who had come to the interview venue. He continued,
You know, I graduated from Harvard University. Get it? Unlike you guys, I'm top-notch.
He was boasting about being a Harvard University graduate. It wasn't clear if it was necessary for this interview, but he kept posing questions that seemed as difficult as the entrance exams for Stanford University or Harvard University. The job seekers at the venue were so overwhelmed by the difficulty that they hung their heads, unable to answer. Amidst this, I was answering all the questions. The interviewers seemed to take a dislike to me and started making unreasonable comments.
You're pretty cocky, huh? All right, solve this. If you can solve this, you're hired on the spot, and I'll give you $2 million.
He was thinking it impossible, with a smug look on his face as he handed over a piece of paper. The printout contained a math question written by hand. Looking at the question on the printout, I murmured just one word. Math, huh?
Well, I think it's impossible for someone with your caliber.
He probably wanted to say that there's no way I could beat him, a Harvard University graduate, but looking at the question in front of me, I confidently responded, You better get that $2 million ready now. The interviewer didn't yet understand the meaning of my confident words, and an unexpected fate awaited him. My name is Michael Johnson. I've grown up in an ordinary family, just an average person. Average in sports, average in studies. Neither good nor bad. Just average. If you asked my classmates, they'd probably say normal. Everyone considers me average, but in reality, there's one thing I'm truly confident in. That's a strong influence of my upbringing. I'm about to share a bit of that story. My family has run a store since my grandparents' generation. Coming home from kindergarten, it became a routine for me to help out in the store with my grandmother. Having watched my grandmother interact with customers since I was young, I was able to do mental arithmetic by the first grade. That'll be $13.69.
Oh, Michael, that's amazing. You can already do such difficult calculations.
While saying that, a regular customer pulled out two $10 bills. I took the money with a proud look and gave him the change. Here's $6.31 change.
You can even calculate the change. Wait, did you use a calculator just now?
No, it's mental math. Hearing that, the regular customer looked surprised.
That's impressive. Have you never used a calculator?
No, I haven't. My grandparents' store didn't have a cash register because they did all the calculations with an abacus. There wasn't any modern system like you'd find in supermarkets or convenience stores. I learned how to use the abacus and do calculations from my grandmother.
You've just started elementary school, right?
Yeah, I just entered this year.
Well, Michael, you're smart. Grandma, he's going to be promising in the future.
My grandparents always praised me, their proud grandson. Initially, I did calculations with the abacus I was taught to use. However, after seeing my grandmother calculate without using an abacus, I wanted to try it myself and asked her to teach me the tricks. It made me happy to be praised, so I helped out in the store every day, and mental arithmetic became fun for me. Even though I said I had learned mental arithmetic at the first grade level, there were still mistakes. I messed up again.
It's okay to make mistakes. Let's try it one more time.
Even so, my grandparents encouraged me to practice mental arithmetic. They praised me when my answers were correct. Initially, I continued because I was happy to be praised, but gradually, I began to enjoy doing the calculations. The feeling of numbers fitting together in my mind like a puzzle, adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. The fact that there was always an answer was fascinating, and I enjoyed it as if I were playing a game. Before I knew it, doing calculations had become my area of expertise, and it has now become the one thing I am truly confident in. Having an area of expertise in mental arithmetic made me start wondering about many other things.
What's up? You've been staring at the sky for a while.
Yeah, I was wondering why the sky changes color.
You were thinking about something that difficult.
My mom was incredibly surprised by my unexpected question. Once something piqued my interest, I wanted to know the answer. Like with calculations, I wanted a clear answer. So, whenever something caught my interest, I would always ask my parents, grandparents, and homeroom teacher. My parents and teachers were happy about my curiosity and gladly taught me. If they could answer right away, they did so on the spot, and if they didn't know, they went as far as to research to teach me. Understanding something I didn't know felt the same as solving a calculation, and I found it fun, becoming more and more engrossed. Collecting knowledge became my hobby, and I was always asking why and how. I was nicknamed Teach Me Kid by those around me, mimicked and teased. But my curiosity never stopped, and by the time I was in 3rd grade, it had powered up even more. As the trivia king, I was respected within the school. The reasons why the sky changes color, why the shape of the moon changes, why rainbows have 7 colors, how clouds are formed, the characteristics of dinosaurs, the ecology of bugs, plants, and flowers, the constellations of the seasons and the myths associated with them. I learned anything and everything that interested me. There was anyone else my age who knew as much about everything as I did. Entering middle school, new subjects sparked my curiosity again. I enjoyed acquiring new knowledge, and the trivia I had accumulated so far somewhat helped, making it feel like the world was expanding. I always liked reading, but upon entering middle school, I enjoyed reading literature with a more sophisticated level of thought. I was particularly drawn to chemistry. The properties of substances, the concept of atoms, and scientific reactions in experiments were all fascinating. German was challenging at first. However, once I started reading novels in German, I naturally became able to read and write. The different grammar from English sparked my interest again. Although I hadn't delved deep into it during elementary school, learning more about history was also fun. Looking back at history, I could see how America came to be operated under its current system. The background of America's economic development, its connections with other countries, and the global influence America has. Unable to contain my curiosity, I read history books beyond the textbooks to study. Having been skilled at mental arithmetic, I was instantly captivated by mathematics when I encountered it. Mathematics is truly simple. There's always an answer. Even if the answer can't be divided evenly, it means there is an answer that can't be divided evenly. In other words, it doesn't end ambiguously. Regarding proof problems, the beauty of proving correctness appealed to me. Until now, I found joy in arriving at answers, using formulas to do so. And I thought the process of arriving at those answers was beautiful. The more problems I solved, the more I got engrossed in finding out which formulas would lead to elegant proofs. During my fun middle school days, I continued to help out at my grandparents' store as always. With my quick and error-free mental arithmetic, my grandparents came to rely on me confidently to manage the store. Studying mathematics at school and practicing mental arithmetic at my grandparents' store. Thanks to this lifestyle, my calculation skills had surpassed the middle school level. In my freshman year of high school, the math teacher, who was in charge, had to be hospitalized for a year due to illness. The temporary math teacher who came was a man named Kevin Martin. He appeared older due to his prematurely white hair but was a young 23-year-old teacher. His passion for mathematics was unmistakably evident. Because he loved it, his teaching was not mechanical, making it very understandable and fun.
High school classes, you have to use the formulas being taught to get the correct answers. Well, it's the most efficient way to solve problems. But I think it's also okay if you can find the answer taking a longer route.
Maybe I can talk to Mr. Martin easily. I felt a closeness to Mr. Martin and thought I might ask questions just like before whenever I didn't understand something. Mr. Martin, can I ask you something? I need help with this part.
Where is it? Oh, really? This is amazing.
Mr. Martin was surprised at the question I brought, perhaps because it was unexpectedly challenging. And for good reason. The question I brought wasn't from the textbook used in class or a reference book for freshmen. If it were at the freshman level, I wouldn't need to ask the teacher. I had already advanced my studies to the level that high school seniors study for entrance exams.
This is free official practice tests, isn't it? Are you studying from this?
Mr. Martin looked at the free official practice test with pleasure.
This brings back memories. I used to solve tests from free official practice tests too. So, what don't you understand?
Mr. Martin seemed to love mathematics. Seeing Mr. Martin's reaction, I felt relieved that my sense of closeness was not misplaced. I became even more immersed in mathematics than before. Mr. Martin taught mathematics in a very fun and understandable way. His slightly different perspective from other teachers overflowed my curiosity. Above all, Mr. Martin looked innocent and joyful when talking about mathematics. From then on, learning mathematics from Mr. Martin became a part of my daily routine. He recommended workbooks to me and even created his own. I thought the questions Mr. Martin made were very beautiful. I couldn't help but enjoy proving them. He also secretly taught me how to solve not covered in class. Mr. Martin made even the formulas and geometric questions I struggled with understandable, making mathematics even more enjoyable and captivating for me. One day, as usual, after school, I went to Mr. Martin, who seemed to be deep in thought. Hesitating to interrupt, I still spoke up. "Mr. Martin, I have something I'd like to learn today too."
Michael, right. All right, let's talk about mathematics today too.
Mr. Martin always talked about mathematics with enthusiasm. Whether his counterpart was a high school student, he couldn't help but be happy and enjoy talking about mathematics. A pure love for the subject was evident. Spending time talking about mathematics with the teacher after school became indispensable for me, and Mr. Martin and I transcended the teacher-student relationship to become comrades who loved mathematics. You really love mathematics, don't you, Mr. Martin?
That's the same for you, isn't it? Oh, yes. I have a favor to ask of you today.
As he said so, Mr. Martin took out a piece of copy paper and began writing on it with practiced ease. When he finished writing, he handed it to me.
Here, this is my request to you.
I was surprised when I saw his request. What was written there was not a math question.
Create an original math workbook by Michael Johnson and surpass the math teacher, Kevin Martin.
What is this? I was so surprised at the unexpected request that I was speechless. Ignoring my reaction, the teacher continued.
Michael, you've solved enough questions already. In terms of solving them, you're at the college level. That's why I want you to go beyond that. From being the solver, why not try becoming the creator of problems? I'm sure you'll find the world of mathematics expanding even more.
Becoming the creator, the world expanding.
Exactly. I can't let your talent go to waste. I want it to blossom. The world seen from the perspective of solving is different from that of creating. Of course, the world that becomes visible is different too.
Mr. Martin was passionately explaining.
I believe you, of all people, will surely discover the hidden fascinations of mathematics.
Mr. Martin trusts me that much. I wanted to respond to his trust. And I also wanted to see the fascinations of mathematics that I hadn't seen yet. Thank you. I'll give it a try.
All right. It won't be easy, but give it a go. I'm waiting for the questions you create, Michael.
After returning home, I immediately started on the homework, but it was harder than I thought. If it were about creating exercises for use in class, I could do it right away. However, the assignment this time was to create an ultra-difficult one that even Mr. Martin couldn't solve. Yet, despite finding it difficult, I also found it enjoyable. I became so engrossed in the homework that I went to school sleep-deprived. And after school, I hurriedly went to Mr. Martin. Mr. Martin, I made it. What do you think? Mr. Martin took the sheet from me and checked it. However, he solved it quite easily. I thought so. You solved it. After my words, Mr. Martin said,
It's very well made. It's a very elegant. I can really tell how much you love mathematics. But, you know.
Mr. Martin looked a bit disappointed as he looked at my question. But, what is it?
You focused on making the question beautiful, and neglected its difficulty.
Exactly. He hit the nail on the head. Indeed, halfway through, I stopped considering the difficulty level, thinking that if I were to create a question, it should be beautiful. Seeing me looking down, somewhat disappointed and sad, Mr. Martin said,
However, to be able to create this much from the start is quite something. Next time, bring me a work you're confident in. I'm looking forward to Michael's challenge.
Yes, next time, I'll definitely impress you, Mr. Martin.
Good. That's the spirit.
I started creating again as soon as I got home. I was glad that Mr. Martin had expectations of me, and I think I began to feel the joy of creating exercises. However, I didn't want to make a question that was just difficult, beautiful and difficult. I worked on creating such every single day, and finally, it was completed. This has to be it. Full of confidence, I went to show it to Mr. Martin. Mr. Martin took a bit longer to solve it than the first one I presented. I thought that the fact he took some time to solve it meant it was a better question than the last one. However, Mr. Martin gave me a strict assessment.
Yes, it's a difficult one. It made me think a bit. You did well, but take another look at this.
Saying that, he showed me my question.
Did you notice anything?
I realized what he meant. It's not beautiful. I mean, it's messy.
Right, it can't be called beautiful. You were too focused on increasing its difficulty, weren't you? Unfortunately, I can't give a passing mark for this.
A question that would impress Mr. Martin was not easy to create. It wasn't enough for it to be just difficult. It also had to be beautiful. The quality of beauty and difficulty had to be maintained to create a question that was truly mine. I continued creating tirelessly, and before I knew it, 3 months had passed. Creating questions is this difficult, I was experiencing what Mr. Martin meant by the perspective of creating. Surely, not just anyone could do this, but he believed I could. To live up to that belief, I couldn't give up. And on the 35th attempt, this is it. I created a math question that felt right. I confidently went to show it him. Mr. Martin, I did it. He silently took the question I confidently handed him and began to solve it. As usual, he was swiftly solving. I watched intently as his pen danced across the paper. Then suddenly, Mr. Martin's dancing pen stopped.
Oh, Michael, this is incredible.
Incredible. What is it?
Ha ha ha. I'm stumped. I can't solve this. It's insolvable for me. You did it. Excellent job.
He was not frustrated that he couldn't solve it. He was delighted by it. I managed to create that even the Mr. Martin couldn't solve. Realizing what had happened, I jumped for joy with him. Yes, mission cleared.
This is fantastic. No matter from which angle you approach it, the solution doesn't reveal itself. It's difficult yet simple and beautiful. Is there really such a question? You've created something even better than I imagined. It's frustrating, but I'm even more pleased. Well done, Michael.
It's all thanks to you, Mr. Martin. If you hadn't suggested it, I would never have thought to create a math question. Mr. Martin and I fist bumped in a victorious pose. At this moment, Mr. Martin and I truly transcended the teacher-student relationship, becoming comrades who loved mathematics. The time and experiences shared with him gave me even more confidence. That much was certain. During the summer break of my freshman year in high school, Mr. Martin called me. "Mr. Martin, what's up?"
Sorry to bother you. I wanted to tell you as soon as possible.
He began with a slightly sad look. Apparently, Mr. Smith, who had been on medical leave, was returning to school earlier than expected. As a result, Mr. Martin would not be returning to school for the second term.
It's really sad to leave without saying goodbye to everyone. At least I wanted to tell you personally.
Facing the reality that I had to say goodbye to Mr. Martin was something I didn't want to accept. But it was already a decided matter. There was nothing I could do. I had no choice but to accept it. And there were other trials for me as well. It was decided that my grandparents' store would close. The place that could be called my origin, my grandparents' store. Mr. Martin, you elevated my math skills. Important things were suddenly gone. I felt a fierce sense of loneliness, as if I had lost my place as well. But right after that, there was no time to feel lonely. First, both my grandparents began showing symptoms of dementia. With both of them affected, caring for them at home became difficult for our family. Reluctantly, we had to admit my grandparents into a nursing home. After settling my grandparents into the facility and finally catching a breath, my father collapsed. He had a pre-existing condition, and his health wasn't great, but it worsened due to the stress of caring for my grandparents. He was admitted to the hospital unconscious. 6 months later, my father passed away. Left behind were just my mother and me. We couldn't sustain our lives as they were. We sold the building and land we used as our home and store. With that money, we rented a cheap apartment and decided to live there, just the two of us. Given our current financial situation, going to university seemed difficult. I decided to get a job instead of pursuing higher education. "Mom, I'll work after I graduate."
What are you talking about? I've saved enough for your expenses for university. Don't worry, and go to college.
My mother said, handing me a bank book in my name.
You've always said you wanted to go to university. You worked hard studying for it, right?
"Thank you, Mom. At least I'll go to a local public university. I'll also do part-time jobs to contribute to our living expenses." From then on, I devoted myself to studying for entrance exams and working part-time jobs. I didn't want to put all the burden on my mother. I worked hard to keep my grades up so I could receive scholarships for university, ensuring that, even if we couldn't afford luxuries, we could have a happy life, supporting each other. Seeing my mother smiling in front of me, I seriously wondered if I should start working immediately, but I couldn't ignore her wish for me to go to university. In the end, I decided to attend the nearest local university from our home. Once I entered university, honestly, all I remember is studying and working part-time. I managed to complete all my credits in 3 years, dedicating the rest of my time to job hunting. This year, as a senior, everyone around me is also putting their full effort into job hunting. I, too, poured my energy into it without falling behind. I checked every company briefing and online session. actively participating. Honestly, I wasn't in a position to choose companies, but I had my non-negotiable conditions. I wanted to ease my mother's burden as much as possible, considering how much she had shouldered for me. I also planned to take on the responsibility for my grandparents' facility fees. I carefully checked not only the salary conditions but also the benefits and made my selections. I positively applied to the companies I had picked out. After applying to about 10 companies, I received an invitation for an interview from one. It's an hour by train from home. Remote work was an option if desired. It's a newly established IT company, but it offers internships. Thinking it was a pretty good offer, I decided to go for the interview anyway. Well, Mom, I'm off to the interview.
Okay, take care. Bye now.
I psyched myself up one last time while looking in the hallway mirror. Let's do this. I didn't intend to be nervous, but the unfamiliar dress suit and leather shoes seemed to heighten my anxiety. Looking back, I saw my mother sending me off with a gentle smile. My mother's smile eased my nerves a bit, and at the same time boosted my morale. Upon arriving at the interview venue, I saw a line of job-seeking peers at the reception. I joined the queue, completed the registration, and was then guided to the waiting area. About 10 minutes later, my name was called, and I headed to the room where the interview would be conducted. Entering the interview room, I introduced myself with my university and name. Although I thought I was accustomed to interviews from my part-time job experiences, I froze for a moment in the unfamiliar, tense atmosphere of the room. The interviewers were a man and a woman. Young-looking, but being interviewers, they must hold positions of responsibility. Especially the man, who looked at me as if appraising me with a scrutinizing gaze. The female interviewer prompted me to sit with a please, to which I responded with a thank you, and bowed slightly before sitting down. As soon as I sat down, the male interviewer started talking.
Today, I'll be conducting the interview. I'm Miller.
He introduced himself quickly. His fast-paced speaking caught my attention, but my nervousness was more overwhelming. The female interviewer also introduced herself, and all of us job seekers greeted in unison.
Pleased to meet you.
After the greetings, I handed my resume to the interviewers. The interviewer, Mr. Miller, was carefully examining each page of the resume. My nervousness increased even more.
What's this? Just a bunch of second and third-rate stuff. Nothing impressive.
It was Mr. Miller's first comment after reading through the resumes. His unexpected remark shocked all the job seekers, leaving us speechless. The female interviewer beside him frowned and sighed in disapproval. The atmosphere in the interview room went completely silent. However, Mr. Miller continued unabated.
You know, I graduated from Harvard University. Get it? Unlike you guys, I'm from a top-tier university. I was hoping there would be someone else from such here, but no one, huh?
Apparently, Mr. Miller was the type to boast about academic backgrounds. Then, Mr. Miller started asking questions.
So, Mr. Michael, here's a question for you.
Yes, please go ahead.
How many prime numbers are there between 1 and 100?
I was surprised by the question. What does this have to do with a job interview? I had expected questions about self-introduction, self-promotion, or motivation for applying.
Huh? Can't answer. I guess that's to be expected from a second-tier university student.
Mr. Miller seemed to think I couldn't answer because I was silent. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19, 23, 29, 31, 37, 41, 43, 47, 53, 59, 61, 67, 71, 73, 79, 83, 89, 97. There are 25 in total.
I guess you could answer that after all.
Mr. Miller, seemingly eager to maintain his superiority, threw another question at me.
Next question then. Deborah Reed was the wife of Benjamin Franklin. But do you know the name of her another husband?
Was he annoyed that I answered the previous math question? This time, he posed a history question. But for me, known as the Trivia King, it was an easy one. It's John Rogers. Mr. Miller clearly showed his frustration on his face. Yet, the questions didn't stop. He kept throwing questions at me that one wouldn't know just from attending classes, but I kept answering them correctly one after another. Mr. Miller seemed unable to contain his frustration any longer, his face turning red.
This is just...
He mumbled to himself while starting to write something on a notebook. Then, tearing a piece from the notebook, he said, "Solve this. There's no way you can, though." With an irritated tone and a flushed face, he handed me the torn piece of paper. He must have been quite annoyed. It took me a while to read the hastily scribbled question, but when I finally did, I was taken aback. Is this, maybe? Seeing my puzzled look, Mr. Miller smugly said,
What's the matter? Can't solve it? Well, that's expected. No way you can, coming from a second-tier university.
Mr. Miller, pleased with himself for getting the upper hand, continued,
If you solve this, you're hired on the spot. I'll even prepare a $2 million signing bonus for you.
Mr. Miller must have thought it was impossible for me to solve. That at my university level, it was absolutely out of question. He must have been certain of it. Indeed, it was a difficult question. Most people seeing it for the first time wouldn't be able to solve it. However, I knew this question. Mr. Miller, please don't go back on your word about the immediate hiring. Oh, and you might want to start preparing the $2 million right now. Mr. Miller, thinking I was just bluffing, didn't take me seriously. But I finished answering in a minute and returned the paper to Mr. Miller. He was surprised at both my confidence and the speed of my response, and even more so upon seeing my answer.
What? How did you?
Is my answer correct? My words seemed to bring back his frustration. You just guessed, right? There's no way that's correct. Do you know the answer to this question?
What are you talking about?
I don't know where you found this, but I created it when I was in high school. There's no way I wouldn't know the answer. Where did you learn about this, Mr. Miller? Only my mentor and I should know about it. I said while looking over the question. Let me ask again. When did you learn about this? Mr. Miller, biting his lip, remained silent and looked down. Suddenly, the door to the room opened, and a man walked in. The moment I saw him, I was filled with nostalgia and joy. What, Mr. Martin? Is that you, really?
President, why are you here?
It was Mr. Martin, my high school math mentor and fellow math enthusiast. I had researched the company's website before the interview, and the president's name was listed differently. But Mr. Miller called Mr. Martin the president. I was shocked and speechless.
Michael, it's been a while.
It's been a long time. I had no idea Mr. Martin was the president. It turned out, after his stint as a temporary high school teacher, Mr. Martin joined the company through mid-career recruitment. With his brilliant mind, Mr. Martin made a significant impact at the company and was appointed president this spring. It had just been a short while since his inauguration, so the website still listed the previous president. That made sense. So that's why Mr. Miller knew about that math problem.
By the way, Mr. Miller, I wanted to ask, was it necessary for our company's interview to include math and history trivia?
Number that is.
I don't recall writing anything like that in the interview manual I created. Can you explain why you decided to ignore the manual?
Well, I thought it would be a good way to gauge if someone is truly talented.
I see. That's commendable, your enthusiasm as an interviewer. Thank you. However, excellence isn't determined by academic background alone. Talented individuals exist regardless of their education, like Mr. Michael here.
After a pause, President Martin continued,
Even if someone graduated from a prestigious university, judging abilities solely based on academic background doesn't make them excellent. You understand, Mr. Miller?
Mr. Miller was left speechless by President Martin's words. He was hanging his head in silence.
Sorry to interrupt the interview. Let me take a look at everyone's resumes.
With that, the president reviewed all the job seekers' resumes.
Everyone has impressive backgrounds. All of you here are passed for the first round. I can't promise a signing bonus, but I'd like you to take the second round as well.
A few days later, I passed the first round. I received a notification for the second round. Although I was a bit puzzled by the presence of people like Mr. Miller, thinking that President Martin was in charge gave me confidence that it would be a fulfilling place to work. I smoothly advanced through the second and third rounds, finally reaching the day of the final exam, a meeting with the president. The president was Mr. Martin. I was nervous, but our conversation ended up revolving around mathematics, just like old times. Was this all right? I wondered, but soon after, I received a notification of my successful application. I successfully joined the IT company presided over by President Martin. It wasn't because I was acquainted with President Martin that I was given preferential treatment or through any connections. I followed the proper procedures and secured the job offer through my own abilities. Mr. Miller, now a senior colleague in the same department, no longer boasted about his academic background. Working together, I realized Mr. Miller was actually very competent. As seniors and juniors, we could talk easily, and I asked him why he brought up academic backgrounds. Mr. Miller mentioned that many of the younger generation have a wealth of knowledge in computers and often surpass him in skill. It seems his actions stemmed from a defensive mindset, not wanting to be underestimated by new employees. Hearing this, I found Mr. Miller somewhat endearing. He's now the senior colleague I trust the most in the company. I aim to become someone who can stand shoulder to shoulder with President Martin someday. With a reliable senior like Mr. Miller, I look forward to improving and honing my skills